record. All right. You ready? This is going to be some hard hitting stuff. I hope you're ready.
Ready. I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Yeah, we've hit the halfway point of the season for a couple of ACC teams this weekend, including the two that will meet in Louisville, the Wahoos and Louisville, a couple of 3-2 teams. The Hoos picking up their first ACC win last Thursday in Miami. That dramatic victory for Louisville, 1-1 after a loss to Wake Forest, a Wake Forest team that UVA is also all too familiar with. We are joined by Ty Spalding of CardinalSports.com, the rival site covering Louisville. Ty, how are you, man?
Doing well. Good to be on here. How are you doing, Damon?
We're doing all right. We're just getting ready for some, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how UVA responds this weekend, coming off their first road win at Miami in a long time. Now they're going to a place in Louisville where UVA has never won. From your perspective, Louisville, like we said, sitting at 3-2, 1-1 in the ACC right now after that loss to Wake. Is this maybe where you expected Louisville to be at this stage in the season? Where does this compare to maybe where the expectations were?
Yeah, so they opened the season with Ole Miss. Obviously, Ole Miss is, as we've seen, they're probably a top 15 team. Obviously Alabama dismantled them over the weekend, but Louisville opened the season with Ole Miss and they lost that one, which I think everyone expected them to lose. And then they came back home and beat an FCS opponent in Eastern Kentucky. And then they kind of got their season back on track with a win over UCF at home on a Friday night, a game-winning pick six, and then went to Florida State, won that one. Florida State's, trending downward, to say the least. And then they lost to a Wake Forest team that is maybe better than folks thought. So all in all, to answer your question, 3-2 is probably where most people had Louisville after 5 games. And the next two at home, Virginia at home and then Boston College at home, I think most fans are expecting both of those to be wins. So some big games coming up for Louisville, and both of them being at home. I think the pressure's on Louisville to get 2 wins coming up.
From the perspective of an Atlantic Division team, how strange is it to be talking about a wide open Atlantic Division? Because obviously it's been a division that's been dominated by Clemson these last few years. How strange is it? And how much of an opportunity is this for, like you saw, like both of us have seen these last few weeks, Wake Forest, and in your instance, Louisville? How big of an opportunity is this for them to maybe make something special happen this year?
Yeah, when they lost to Wake Forest, it was a game that they definitely had their chances to win. The loss is one thing, but big picture, a special season is on the table. If you put together some wins, you're talking, New Year's Six bowl game is right there for the taking. So when you're in ACC play this year more than ever, when you lose a conference game, it's not only the loss, but it's the fact that it's wide open. It's there for the taking. And Scott Satterfield, even said in his press conference this week, it's like he said, everything, we want to play for, everything, we set our goals for at the beginning of the season is still there. And I think he was hinting at the ACC championship game, which, it sounds crazy, but it's really not when you dig deep into it.
What's the opinion of Satterfield in year 3 out in Louisville?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first year he took over a 2-win football team, large part due to Bobby Petrino mailing it in. And he won 8 games his first year, and the vibes around here were very good. Most folks thought that we had an offensive guru per se on our hands. He establishes that stretch zone run. He takes his shots deep when he can. And then in year 2, we just took a step backwards. Obviously, COVID, every team was dealing with COVID. Louisville had a handful of games where they were missing key players, but that wasn't an excuse for most fans. Louisville took a step back in year 2. And then this year, I got off to a rocky start. The Ole Miss game, they were shut out in the first half. The next game against Eastern, it took them, a quarter and a half to score 1 touchdown. And then everything kind of changed with that UCF game on Friday night. Louisville basically controlled the game, and then one on a pick six with seconds left. And then from then on, we've seen some things on the offensive side of the ball, especially that have given fans hope for the rest of the year. So I think as of now, fans are bought in on Satterfield, at least for the rest of the year.
Malik Cunningham is a guy that UVA is pretty familiar with. He started 3 games against him already. This will be the 4th time that they've seen him. He's a guy who, when you look at the numbers, he's been more effective as a runner against UVA than he has been as a passer. He has almost as many rushing yards in those previous games as he does as a passer. How has he grown and matured in his time as Louisville's quarterback, and what has he looked like to this point? How important is he to that offense?
So Malik Cunningham last year was turnover prone, not only throwing the ball, but also running the ball. He had costly turnovers and seemed like every game. So the storylines all summer, all camp, was, can Malik, take care of the ball? Can he, learn how to check the ball down? Can he stay in the pocket a little bit longer? And up to this point, he's probably been playing his best football ever at Louisville. He's willed Louisville to their wins with his legs and his arm. He's been great running the ball. He's been great throwing the ball, and he hasn't thrown. He threw 1 interception against UCF. But other than that, he's taking very good care of the ball. And he's playing well enough to where Louisville is getting the play at quarterback that they need to get to have the season they want to have. So as Louisville goes, or as Malik Cunningham goes, Louisville goes. That's typically what we've seen up to this point, and I expect that to continue.
Defensively, how would you evaluate the way Louisville has played? Obviously, they hung in with Wake Forest last week, which is something that UVA could not say the week before, but UVA's calling card has been its offense this season. From that perspective, the matchup of the UVA offense against the Louisville defense, where do you see that one kind of shaking out?
So a lot of talk has been centered around the fact that Louisville's defense statistically isn't very good, but should you put an asterisk on it when you consider the high power offenses they've played? Obviously, Ole Miss has a great offense. UCF had a great offense. When Louisville played them, I believe they were right behind Ole Miss in a lot of those categories. And then Wake Forest has a great offense. So Louisville's defense statistically isn't very good. But the question is, should you pause for a little bit before determining that when you look at the offenses they played? The biggest thing with Louisville and Brian Brown, the defensive coordinator, he's in his 3rd year. He came over with Scott Satterfield. He's been with Satterfield for quite some time. And the big thing that Brian Brown, pushes is the bend, don't break defense. So he'll tell you straight up, we don't really care how many yards we give up. We don't care, if the team drives it, up and down the field. It's how many points are we giving up? That's really his philosophy. And he'll tell you that it's the bend, don't break defense. It's frustrated some fans quite a bit, especially.
I was going to ask how fans felt about that philosophy.
So it's frustrated a lot of fans, specifically only rushing 3 guys a lot of the time. So UVA on Saturday, anything 3rd and 7 or longer, I would expect Louisville to drop 8 in coverage. And Wake Forest, Sam Hartman was able to just sit in the pocket, pat the ball, and a receiver is going to get open if you give him 10 seconds. And so Wake Forest, a lot of fans were really upset with the fact that Louisville dropped 8, and the 3 they rushed just could not touch the quarterback. And they burned him a couple of times on 3rd and longs. But that's what Brian Brown does. That's what he's always done. And I expect UVA to see a lot of that on Saturday.
So you mentioned earlier these next 2 games being critical for Louisville if they want to get to where they want to go this season. What needs to happen from a Louisville perspective against UVA on Saturday? UVA has obviously never won at Louisville. What needs to happen from the Cardinals' perspective to keep that the case?
Yeah, so I mentioned it earlier. Scott Satterfield's offense, everything falls in line behind the running game. and specifically the stretch run, the zones, the outside zones, off tackle runs. That's the staple of his offense. So if that clicks, then everything else opens up. The bootleg off of that with Cunningham opens up. The deep shots down the field off play action open up. The read options with Cunningham, reading the end and running or handing it off. Everything comes after the stretch run. So I think it's Louisville's offensive line. I think they've been good at times. They've been bad at times. Against Wake Forest, Louisville averaged 4.8 yards a rush, and they were just creating huge holes up front for the Louisville running backs to find. And I think it all starts with the Louisville offensive line. I think Louisville's offensive line playing well against UVA is going to be something that if they do play well, I think Louisville wins.
Hi, Spalding, CardinalSports.com. Thanks, man. We appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Absolutely. If you have time for some questions yourself, definitely would like to get our readers and our subscribers an inside look on Virginia.
For sure.
So obviously the quarterback play, the offense for Virginia has been something that's being talked about. Is it Brennan Armstrong just playing extremely well, or is it some playmakers on the outside stepping up? What's been the key to Virginia's success on offense?
I think it's been a little bit of both. I think for starters, Brennan Armstrong is a much better quarterback this year. He's a lot more accurate. He's a lot more decisive. He's doing a better job of kind of reading what the defense is going to throw at him before the snap and not necessarily forcing balls to his primary target and checking down and looking around. And he's bought some time with his feet. He hasn't been quite as mobile this year. He got hurt a little bit, got nicked up his right leg in the Illinois game, the second game of the season, second half of that game. And that kind of hindered his mobility for a while, but he's looked back to himself as a runner a little bit more these last couple of games. But still, I think there's also a lot of the guys on the playmakers on the outside have done a better job of just getting themselves open. Guys like Dontavion Wicks, Rayshon Henry, Keaton Thompson, Billy Kemp across the middle of the field. He's a guy Armstrong looks to a lot on third down. Now, the key last week at Miami, the big difference with the offense was they didn't have Jelani Woods, the 6'7" tight end, who is obviously a big presence across the middle of the field and is also a big threat after the catch to break tackles and go for yards after the catch. He missed that game, and we're not sure. There hasn't been any kind of indication. Last time we talked to Bronco, he did not have an update as to whether Woods would be available this weekend against Louisville. So without him, that allowed Miami's defense to maybe pay more attention to those guys on the outside. It was one less thing they had to worry about and focus on. At 6'7", obviously a pretty big concern, literally. So if Jelani Woods is back this week, that makes the UVA passing offense that much more dynamic, gives Armstrong another big target across the middle. Like I said, who's also a big play threat. Dontavion Wicks has been the big deep threat down the field. He's the guy who, if you saw the highlight or you watched the Miami game on Thursday, he's the guy who made that wild catch off the back of the Miami defensive back and it bounced into his hands.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah, that was Wicks. But other than that, Miami did a relatively good job, especially compared to some of the other teams, of corralling Wicks. So yeah, I think the question is, will Woods be back in the middle of the field? Because that opens up a lot of things for the rest of the UVA pass offense.
Real quick, let me add something. You mentioned injuries. Just for the UVA fans out there, Louisville lost probably one of their best defensive players, linebacker Monty Montgomery, tore his ACL against UCF, and he's been out the whole year. And in the games he hasn't played in, the backup linebackers have really struggled. And then Louisville lost probably their best receiver, Braden Smith. He's out for the season as well with a torn ACL. So a key guy on each side of the ball are out for the season. And then last game, Louisville lost a starting offensive lineman, Renato Brown, and then starting defensive end, Ashton Gelati. Both of those guys are probably going to be game time decisions this week. So I just wanted to add that in, just something to keep an eye on as well.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, a couple other quick questions for
Sure.
you. So the UVA defense, Louisville fans are pretty familiar with Anthony Johnson. He obviously transferred from Louisville. He's carved out a starting role there. Touch on, him a little bit, and then just overall, what the UVA defense likes to do, what they're good at, where their weaknesses are.
Yeah, he arrived here. Obviously, he's a grad transfer in the offseason. And basically in the offseason, UVA set out to rebuild or revamp its pass defense because they were, I mean, to be blunt, they were atrocious against the pass last year. They gave up like 304 yards per game through the air last year. So they did a couple of different things. They shuffled the coaching staff a little bit, shuffled some assignments with more of an emphasis on the defensive backfield. They're going to they're more of a dedicated 3-3-5 this year, as opposed to the base 3-4 that they had been for Broncos' first 5 years, and then going to those sub packages with more defensive backs. They're dedicated to the 3-3-5 this year. And that's kind of where Johnson has fit in as another one of those defensive backs. He was brought in to compete and push for playing time. And he obviously has done that, has worked his way into the starting. He had the first interception of the year for the UVA defense late in the Illinois game. But he has allowed them to move Nick Grant, who had started the last 2 years as a corner. Johnson's presence has allowed them to move Grant to a safety, where he seems to be maybe more of a natural fit. Johnson has solidified that corner spot. He's if you look at the Pro Football Focus grades, he graded out as their best player in the game against Wake Forest on defense. Their best play, his performance against Wake, that was their best defensive grade of the year in any of their first 4 games. But yeah, he's been another steady veteran presence, and you can tell that the coaching staff really likes him. You can tell his teammates really like him too. The sense of humor, kind of a laid back guy that he is. Even when we go over to practice, he's one of the guys who's joking around with the media after practice and things like that. So yeah, he seems to have been a good fit both on the field and in the locker room. And he's kind of helped solidify that secondary. Now, obviously you look at the stats and that secondary has struggled, especially in ACC play. Actually, the defense played really well the first 2 games against William and Mary in Illinois, but a lot of that was a product of William and Mary essentially wasn't trying to do a whole lot in that game. They were just trying to get out of there healthy, because they went into that game without their starting quarterback, without their top running back, without their left tackle, their longtime left tackle. So they were banged up going into the season opener. And the quarterback they started was a true freshman making his first career start. So they didn't exactly challenge UVA. UVA shut them out. In Illinois, UVA, again, was pretty dominant on the defensive side. So then when they went to Carolina, and Carolina hung 59 on them and 699 yards of total offense, that was a bit of a wake-up call for UVA defensively. And they're still kind of learning from what was exposed by Carolina, and they looked a little better against Wake. They did some good things against Miami, especially in the first half. I mean, I know it sounds simple, but just getting off the field on third down, forcing some negative plays, forcing some punts. Carolina didn't punt at all in that game in Chapel Hill. And then Wake on the Friday night game here didn't punt until late in the fourth quarter, when they were essentially running 3 dives and then punting it away to get out of there with the win, just run out the clock. So when UVA forced a couple of punts and a couple of 3-and-outs in the first half, the first couple of possessions, Miami didn't convert a third down until the third quarter. So that was a significant step forward for UVA's defense. They didn't have a sack or force a turnover against Wake. They had a couple of sacks against Miami, but then late in that Miami game, as they were coming back, some of the things that had plagued them started to expose themselves again. I think it's last 3 games, UVA has given up a 50-yard run and at least one 40-yard pass in each of the last 3 games. So big plays are obviously something that they still need to improve on. So we'll see. They talk a lot about how the tempo Miami ran, the tempo Wake ran, they were caught out of position before the snap, and that kind of obviously led to some bad things after the snap. You guys saw Wake last week and how they were able to exploit the slightest mistakes by a defense. They're just so well coached. And they did that all night long against UVA. So it's still obviously incremental improvement, I think, is how they've described it, but not even close to where they expect to be from a defensive standpoint.
Yeah, just real quick on Anthony Johnson. He was a good player here. I don't think it was anything like Louisville, couldn't use him at all. I think, he played quite a bit here. He was good when he played. So I think it was more just, looking for something new. So it's not really surprising to hear that he's playing well. And then as far as the tempo goes, Louisville, they don't really do a no huddle. They'll typically huddle up. They'll get to the line, and a lot of times, Cunningham will walk up to the center, hold the snap off, look over to the sideline. So as far as the tempo goes, I don't think that will be an issue for UVA. A final one here, and then we'll wrap up. Just real quick on Bronco Mendenhall. You said he's been there for 5 years. This is 6 years. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. You kind of asked me the same question. Obviously UVA's had some good years under Bronco. What's the next step for the program? Is Bronco, perceived as the guy to do that? And kind of what's the fans' take on Bronco?
I think in the short term, recency bias, there are some concerns among the fan base just because of how especially that Carolina game went, and then coming right off of that, the way the Wake Forest game went at home, back-to-back 20-point losses to open up ACC play. I think there's some trepidation after that. And you also have to keep in mind that if that field goal splits the uprights at Miami last Thursday, we're talking about a team that's 0-3 in the ACC and couldn't hold on to that lead they had led all night until that the field goal at the end there that would have won it for Miami. So I think the conversation will be a whole lot different this week had that field goal not doinked off the upright. But I do think bigger picture, I think obviously you're talking about they won the Coastal Division, got to the Orange Bowl, got to the ACC championship game in 2019, but then came back last year with the 5-5 season. And I think you give the benefit of the doubt to that being the COVID year, and just it was a weird year for everyone. And they finished the year prior. I mean, obviously the way they played and the way they lost in Blacksburg to finish this season was not what anyone had in mind. But prior to that, they got hot after the bad start, after the losing streak to start. They got hot, including the Louisville win in Charlottesville. So that's something that I feel like people are kind of tossing out and giving the benefit of the doubt because of the COVID year. So I don't think Bronco's under any sort of heat from the administration by any stretch. I think Carla Williams, the AD, and Bronco are kind of in lockstep on what needs to happen. They're both pretty vocal about the improvements that need to happen facilities wise at UVA and how much of a challenge they've got. The oldest facilities, practice facilities in the league, 30 some years old now, and how much of a challenge that can be from a recruiting standpoint. So, but I think there's definitely we still need to see a little bit more is how I would describe it from the fans. There have been years in the past where the program has shown improvement, but then can't quite sustain it, takes a step back. And I think fans have been burned by that over the years. And so there's kind of that sense of we need to see more consistent, sustained success. And I mean, but within the program, they're pretty blunt that the goal now is to win the Coastal every year, to be in contention every year. And they're not out of it, especially after winning that Miami game. That absolutely got them back in the mix. Again, it would be a whole lot different conversation if they had let that one get away. So, but yeah, I think internally they expect to compete for the Coastal, and who knows, they come a month from now, especially if they win this game on Saturday, for instance, they could very well be right in the thick of it because the Coastal, as always, is so weird. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, and I gave my prediction a little earlier. I think Louisville wins in a close one. I could definitely see it being high scoring for sure. I'll go with Louisville 42-35. You got a prediction for the game?
Yeah, I've got from a UVA perspective. This feels like one of those games where they've got a lot of those fifth year, sixth year super seniors who came back for one last chance at one last chance, for lack of a better way of putting it. And this feels to me like one of those games where the sense of urgency kicks in and UVA does find a way to win this game on the road. I think it's like you said, I think there are going to be a lot of points. I think it's going to be a close one. I think it'll come down to one of those late in the fourth quarter. I don't know if it'll be quite as dramatic as the field goal off the upright as time expires as it was last week in Miami. But I think I'm going to say 38-35 UVA wins it.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having me on, Damon. best of luck this weekend, and we'll catch up hopefully basketball season or next football season.
Awesome. Thanks, Ty. It's great to meet you.
Yep, you as well. Take care.
All right, man. Let me hit stop on this record.